Open up. Oh,
We have a sound in the background. Is that someone?
It's mine. It's mine, Lucia. It's mine. I will stop. Don't worry.
Okay.
It's just to not have that awkward silence. Você entrou aí? Não, né? Hum? Não. Hello, everyone. So we are 4 p.m. sharp. Let's start our webinar, Life After COVID, the New Normal. I am Maria Luisa Pinho. I am a BACC Southeast board member and graduate research assistant at the Center of International Business of Georgia State University. And we are so excited to have you guys here to present the life after COVID, the new normal under construction. We will, sorry. We would like also to thank you to University Cyber to provide the technological support for us to promote this event. And we are very glad that you are here with us. So along with me, we have Lucia Jennings, BACC chairwoman. We have Lucas Santos, Mauricio Viana, Janet, and Bibiana from MJV Innovation. They will present themselves just in a few minutes. So just a few things we are called the Zoom webinar lingo. So we are the panelists here with you. So all of you are muted, okay? So if you need to talk to us, you can use the chat or the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available for you in a few days to be available so you can see it, but also for people who could not be with us here today. So just to go for a little details here. So you will have on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will have 3 buttons. So you will have the chat that you can post messages to all the panelists or to individual persons if you want. You can raise your hand and we will get to you to see what is going on. But the main feature we really would like for you guys to use is the Q&A. So the Q&A is the question and answers that will allow us to answer to you at the end. We want also to acknowledge and thanks our sponsors from the chamber that allows the chambers to exist, but also to do all the projects that we have connecting the United States, southeast of the United States and Brazil. Just the last remark. So if you need to contact us, you have the contacts from Lucia Jennings. And when you finish this webinar, there's a brief survey that it's available that we really would like to hear from you, your feedbacks and suggestions for future webinars. So GSU Cyber and BACC, we are developing a little agenda of events. So the next closed events that we have is the webinar on meta-analysis, and it's going to be on June 25 with Dr. Ahmet Kirk. So we would love to, if you want to join us on this webinar in this series, and the live section will be, as I said, on 25 June. So without further ado, let's introduce I want to present you guys MJV Technology and Innovation. So BACC have been working with them in the past, and they are also members of our chamber. They are an end-to-end business consulting and help Fortune 500 companies with business challenges, digital transformation projects, innovation, and technology solutions. So they have been in Atlanta for the past 5 years, and we have the pleasure to get to know them and work with them. So I will pass the baton to Mauricio Viana, who is CEO of MJV Innovation. So it's on you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. It's a pleasure to be able to participate at this webinar. Today we have a very tight agenda. If Lucas could pass to the next slide. But we have a team that will be presenting today with me. So we have Bibiana, who's leading our future design research. And we also have Jeanette, who's also our strategic designer at MJV. What we're going to see today is a brief introduction of this topic. Of the subject of this webinar is life after COVID-19, which is very relevant because I mean, all of us, when faced with COVID initially, I think we all, I mean, it took about maybe 2 to 3 weeks for people to adapt and business to adapt actually to this new scenario. And companies were, I think the reaction was equivalent to a war. So everyone was very worried. I don't know of any business that has not been affected by COVID. So they really had to put in place new processes, new measures, new starting from the employees having to go to work from home, and so several challenges. But after 3 weeks, some companies started to think, you know, what's going to happen? What's going to be, you know, if this social distancing, this lockdown remains for a long time, what's going to happen with my business? And this is where MJV comes in as a global design, digital technology innovation company. We started to think and research about what was actually happening in the world, and helping our clients with you know, by doing you know, a thorough research on what was happening in the world. We started to help our clients with some of the insights, especially with the new consumer behavior. So today we're going to have so this brief introduction, then we'll have the presentation of the research with some, you know, very briefly. We do have tons of materials available for free at our website, mjvinnovation.com, where you can go there, click on future scenarios, future design, and you get to our research. And then the drivers of change, which is part of our work, has to do with strategic foresight in terms of understanding what's coming and how organizations can prepare to what's coming. And then a little discussion of Q&A and how to apply this research, really. The goal of today is, after we present our research, is to be a little bit more engaging, interactive. So we have a chance for the participants not only to ask questions, but also to participate. The idea is that at the end of this webinar, we would have seen the research, but also some, like 4 different scenarios that we feel are very important for every company to address and think about it. And this is where we're going to open up for some discussion. So about MJV, we have about 11 offices around the world, in Atlanta, South America, in Europe. We've actually been traveling all over the world. We mainly focus on financial sector, insurance, FMCG, travel, and manufacturing and energy sectors. Those are the sectors that MJV has been working. We have about 800 employees, and really being very bold in terms of going, you know, globally to provide our services. The next slide, it's a brief introduction. I don't know if you all have seen, but it's a brief introduction to the research that we have done. So it's a reflection of what happened to all of us. So I would request you all to pay attention to this video, because it's a reflection, and then we'll see some of the changes that have been happening very as a weak signal, because a lot of what we do in terms of scenario planning and future design is understanding those weak signals and paying attention to them, and eventually designing to address them. Because if the weak signal becomes a big signal, then we have an opportunity, let's say, in a positive way. So this video really introduces the study, and I think, Lucas, if you could play, please.
A virus emerges in a corner of the world. Suddenly, all humans on the planet are on lockdown. That tells us more about humans and their behaviours than about the virus itself. The year was 2020, and this is how it all started. We won't say everything changed, but a lot of what we knew was normal turned upside down almost overnight. 2020 launched the post-normal era. But what exactly's changed? We've been hearing whispers of it for a while. All those were slow burn promises, until 2020 that is. Pre-pandemic was a time when fiction was the helm of filmmaking, whilst in post-pandemic, fiction-like narratives have become our new regular. We're all together on this supersonic roller coaster, and we don't know when or where it's going to. The only certainty is the opportunity for reinvention. The post-pandemic new normal, this mythical creature some are desperate to find, it's not a one-way answer. It is, instead, a myriad of uncertainties and choices that we humans, we society, have the opportunity to make, collectively and individually. To drive change in a way to build desirable futures, preferably for all. To help companies and individuals navigate these choices, we've designed a future map of sorts. This map contains some of the countless uncertainties surrounding us and the divergent paths they can lead to. Welcome to the new normal. It's under construction, and it depends on your choices, our choices. In 10 years, what will we wish we'd done today?
Yes, thank you, Lucas. So now we'll have Bibiana talk briefly about the 8 macro territories and the future wheel that we developed, and after that we'll have Jeanette. Please, Bibiana, with you.
I was muted. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today and for giving us the opportunity to present this research. It's called New Normal Under Construction exactly because of a sentence there's in the video that says that for many people, this new normal seems to be a mythical creature or a flying saucer that is going to come and bring a new normal. And it's actually not. It's a construction that we are all having the opportunity to make together. So that is why it's called under construction. What we are going to present now is the map that we found out throughout our research. Lucas, can you please move on? So how do we find this crumbs? Our crumbs in terms of future are signals of change and uncertainties. And we find that by small things that we find today that point to the future. We can move on. This was an extensive research, took in terms of 3 months to do it. And it involved a lot of people from MJV. The important thing about this is that we combined 2 different methodologies. So we used scenario planning methodology to find these future crumbs and define the uncertainties. That's what they call. Once you define the uncertainties, you have polarities about them, because that's the nature of them. They are uncertain, therefore there are more than one way that you could follow. Up to that point, it was a very methodological and straightforward research, and it would count up to 1,404 possible combinations of a 2x2 matrix if we were to do one. But then that's not enough to show the complexity of our world. So we moved into another methodology, and we combined together with a strategic foresight, where we have the 10 drivers of change. You can pass on the slide. So there you go. That's what we have, a combination of solid data with a more complexity-oriented material that's able to connect the dots between the different uncertainties and polarities. And then, if you could jump the slide, we have been feeding this research with new data. So we are monitoring whatever is new using data science and data visualization. And in the next slide, you can see how our collective MJV brain is looking right now, right? So that's an example of what we have. We have here 8 macro territories. Health, of course, where it all started. Then we have work, where we felt the first impacts of it. In work, we have some very interesting things, like Harvard Business Review brought up the idea that we have to develop virtual intelligence capabilities, because none of us, although digital to some degree, none of us had ever had the need to be completely digital to survive and to talk to our loved ones and to not be lonely and vulnerable. So that's one of the important things on the work side, the construction of new skills, or how to balance productivity and work-home life. Because now the kids are here and you're homeschooling and you're making lunch and you're also having to do your webinar, and the dogs, if you heard, just barked because the vet is here. So it's everything together, right? And we are having to deal with that, to deal with life in many layers. And then we felt the impact in education. Everyone with kids know how difficult it has been homeschooling in this period. And of course, that affected behavior a whole lot. And with behaviors being affected, we had to rely on technology and infrastructure to make it happen. So we have never been so dependent on technology that we are now. And that started to affect macroeconomics, not only because of the technology, but in terms of supply chain and the effects in the economy and all that came with the lockdowns and the things that we have to live through, to go through the corona pandemics. And then it became more than just the corona, right? It started as the corona crisis, and now it's not anymore. It's just a whole out there crisis that brings us to really question some values and to question society and to see where are we going, things like that. And of course, in a higher sphere, we have what governments are thinking and doing, and the geopolitical and governmental things that are going on. So basically, this is that's the territory, that's the layout of our map that allowed us to conclude into 10 drivers of change. And that's what Jeanette will explain to us. There are a couple of slides that you're going to see the deep dive a little bit more on this 8 macro territories, but we are not going to go into them right now, okay? So the floor is yours, Jeanette.
Thank you, Bibi. So as you can see, she mentioned that we have these deep dive into each of the sectors, and you guys can all receive this research afterwards. But what we've done through some of these slides is put in the territory and then some of those signals that we're seeing, and It includes links to different articles and things like that. So if you can move on past these, Lucas, that would be awesome. And so now to our drivers of change. And as BB explained, these are the forces that we see that are present across all scenarios. And throughout most of the time, we see that these have different impacts, and they can impact the future in different ways. They can go in different polarities, as explained. And so we've narrowed those down to 10 drivers of change. And for the purposes of this presentation today, we're going to go through the first 5. But these include the collective human body, the Titanic syndrome, and the layers of inequality, virtual intelligence, digital intimacy, and the loss of serendipity, our life indoors, digital being borderless, and the ones that we won't touch on today, but will definitely be available for anybody who wants to take a deeper look, are individualization and scale, the future being urgent, reinvented money and value, trust, and the overload of information, which has been coined as informatoxication, and then the world in suspense, basically, and waiting for what will happen next. So with the collective human body, what we're seeing is that health as we know it has gotten a new layer and a new meaning, and it goes beyond just the individual. So we're seeing that now what we consider as health and what we're seeing is influenced by the media, it's influenced by data, we're seeing surveillance and privacy being jumbled into this mix. And we no longer see health as an individual matter, but as a collective responsibility. So my neighbor's health does depend on what I do and what I don't do, and all the people that I come into contact somehow become now my responsibility. And so we've seen this collective responsibility in places like Korea and China, where they've taken on surveillance as a way to monitor and create awareness for other people, whether that comes in apps or different things like that. And so we see this, as you can see on the uncertainties, we've mapped out which ones it impacts, right? So of course it impacts our health, but we see it impact our behaviors, the technology that comes about to make it possible to monitor. Then we start to consider our values, which is more valuable, right? Is it our health or is it our privacy? And then eventually how that trickles up and what government does. Are there any policies, things like that? So some of the examples that we see for that are the food demand is one that we saw almost immediately. We see a lot of people trying to be more healthy and trying to find other ways to do that. And one of those is eating organic. And so we saw that this crisis really impacted the demand on organic and locally sourced ingredients and foods. And on the other side of that, we also see this increased surveillance and the health disclosures that go, because it's the health of the masses versus the privacy of the singular person. And then on the next one, we have another driver, which is the Titanic syndrome, and it's the inequality in layers. And so the reference there is that on that Titanic, we had people that had immense amount of wealth, but we also had people that were very poor. And when it came to, finding safety, it was very evident the classes and the inequality that existed. And so with coronavirus, it really exposed a lot of the inequalities that we had in our societies, and that was evidenced by workers, people who had the ability to do home office versus those who didn't, the types of jobs that do have the ability to be home versus the types that do not. We saw that in businesses and which ones were able to stay afloat and had the resources to close and then reopen versus the ones who did not have that same ease. We saw that in different lifestyles, health, education, government, the access to technology. So in some areas, people had a very easy time connecting. In other areas, without the ability to connect to technology, they were sort of stranded and on their own. And so we're seeing, these global problems, and we're seeing injustices, we're seeing unilateral views We're seeing in some places people come together and really fight and make sure that everybody is okay and everybody's surviving. And so here again, the uncertainties for everybody to kind of see. We see all the ones that it touches, and in what ways it touches them. And so the examples here, one of the examples that we saw are fintechs helping small businesses recover from the impacts of COVID-19. And so in exchange for data from those small businesses, they gave them credit to help them grow and help them survive through the times of crisis and through the times of having to be closed. We also see different pressures coming on different industries and different types of workers. For example, workers that are paid very low wages, for example, delivery services and things like that are still considered essential. And so they're at a much higher risk, and perhaps maybe not at the same level as far as income and benefits as some other jobs. Then we have virtual intelligence and digital intimacy and the loss of serendipity. So I think many of us have experienced this. There's this feeling that we don't have that those encounters that happen naturally. Through walking through the office, you saw somebody new, you might stop and chat. Now we have to go out of our ways if we want to do that. And for a lot of us, that means that we've lost some of those connections that we had before, in the same way that we had them then. What we've also seen on the other side of this is that we see that more people connect in a different way. We all see each other in our most personal times, in our most personal environments. For example, as Vivi mentioned her dog, you get to know what kind of pets people have, their children. You might see family members pop in. So there are different types of scenarios, but in this one, it's really about that loss of serendipity and how we cope and how we work to find these moments and create these moments in a new digital landscape. And so some of the examples that we see here are people having meetings using video games. So using Red Dead Redemption, for example, to hold work meetings so that it feels a lot more personable, it feels different. It's not everybody looking straight into a screen, but really trying to get them together and do different things, build fires, debate projects, and almost make it a little bit more casual, and bring back that serendipitous feeling. And another example that we see are celebrities also inviting people into their homes. We saw this celebrity here who wore pajamas and invited everybody in her home and did this little show for everybody, showed her kids. And the pajamas she wore actually sold out in just 3 days. And it's this desire to connect in different ways that we all have, right? So maybe we're not there, but we get this new sense of that person and we see who they are and what gives them comfort, and then gives us this different ability to connect with different people. Our next driver is the inside life. And so as we've all experienced this, things change. So we were suddenly in isolation, or we were all within, our family in a smaller spaces. And suddenly the place where we live is also the place where we work, is also the place where we get educated. And this had an impact on our families, the relationships, the layout of our homes for some of us, mental health. Just a lot of things changed once we had to go and live completely indoors. What we would call as our world suddenly shrank and involved less space. And this now changes not only the way we consume things and the way we experience things, but the way we think about infrastructure in general. So now that we start to transition out, how has this inside life really impacted the way that we see the future? Will we stay inside more? Will we want to go out more? Will we want to change our homes? What will this look like? What is the meanings that we find, and what are we learning about ourselves from being indoor? And so if you go to the next one, we see how different industries and players are trying to give us these experiences within our homes. So for example, one of them is a London brewery who delivers the pub in a box. And so it allows you to experience going to a pub within your own home. So you get the snacks that you get at the pub, you get what you're gonna drink, you even get a Spotify playlist so you can listen to the music. And so it really tries to bring these new experiences for you to have at home. The next one is virtual tours. And so we had seen these in the past, they hadn't really hit off, but there was an ability to experience new things, and now we're seeing more of these where you're not only getting to tour it almost the way you do on a treadmill where you could run through different paths, but these are local people with cameras, and you almost get that sensation of being able to control where this person is going and feel more involved in this travel experience. And then the last one that we have, number 5. What we have is digital is borderless. And so for this one, what happened is until now we had really seen marginalized people or people in developing countries, and they were really not able to be part of it, right? But now when this happened and we all had to be online, we all had to be digital, it really accelerated the need to have those markets be a part of it. And so we really pushed everybody to join in. And so like a personal thing, for example, my grandma would never touch electronics, didn't want an iPad. And after the pandemic, when she couldn't visit her grandkids and couldn't visit other parts of the family, she learned how to use the iPad and she learned how to do FaceTime. And so really opening up not just for developing countries, but for the elderly and other people, opening up the digital world and pushing them into that world, having them get involved. And now as this digital literacy increases for companies, it's a new opportunity. It's a new way to develop relationships. It's new customers that you can develop relationships with that perhaps before you did not have that opening to. And so we have this hyper digitalization and hyper acceleration of our new digital economy and the new digital landscape. So it opens up jobs, it opens up new products, and it opens up a new side of the economy. And so here we see the ones that it touches, and some of these examples on the next slide are, we see that other companies also have a chance. So we know that Amazon is doing great, but we also see other smaller players gain a little bit of foothold because everybody has the same access to online. And that second example there allows even users to create their own streets, their own personalized storefronts. We've also seen the emergence of many new people trying to start businesses out of their homes, whether that's cooking, whether that's selling DIY crafts, but everybody can become a player in e-commerce with the fact that everybody is now digital. And so when we consider, just those 5 drivers of change, we see that every aspect of how we live our lives and how society works is now up for debate. And so this is a quote from Seth Godin that we have here. But that really gives us this moment to reflect and think about these drivers and how they're going to impact us and our industries and our fields of study, whatever those may be. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the chat to see if there are any questions. And in that time, I want to give you guys a little moment to think about the 5 drivers that we just talked about and think which one is most relevant to your industry or field. And then just in the chat, you can pop in the drivers name or the number, whatever is easier. And then tell us what industry or field you're in and why you think that that one is the most important driver or the most relevant. And so I'll just give you guys about a minute. No pressure, but feel free to let us know what those are.
Hi there, Bibi again here. We had a question here that was quite interesting. So Guy asked, at what point did we and what led us to recognize there is not going to be a return to the old normal? That's a very good question and much valid. And part of the uncertainties is exactly about people and this wish that we have to return to old normal, just to return to some normal. Just we want some normality, everyone at this point just wants like a thread of normality. But what this every study in futurism always starts as exploratory, so we don't have answers as much as we have questions, and we follow those questions until we find the signals of change. Those are the things that tell us if things are changing or not. So when we reach saturation levels on certain topics of certain behaviors, then we see that that behavior will eventually grow and become more relevant to society as a whole and not just as a niche. So those signals of change are the things that drive us into believing in the new normal. And of course, it's important to say here that it's not one future and it's not affecting everyone equally at the same time. So there are many futures and people are being affected in different ways. I see the chat popping there. So
I know, it's great. We're getting some responses there. So thank you for everybody. I'll continue to through the presentation, but feel free to continue letting us know. And if you want some, give yourself a little explanation of why, or if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and address those. So now that we've kind of seen the research, and again, this was just a taste, we have much more within all of these and 5 other drivers of change that are also good to look at and to think about. But how do we apply this research? Once we look at everything and we're at the end of it, what do we do then, right? And so it's important to use this for mapping opportunities and uncertainties. So those are going to exist for all of us and for all of the type of businesses that we're in. And it's good to map those and understand what those are. Then we go into scenario building specific to your context and co-creating and synthesizing some possible solutions for all of these different opportunities, uncertainties, and scenarios. And then we start to prioritize those, right? So make some business priorities into what can come first, what is best to come first, and then take that and create strategic roadmaps for how do we strategically implement these, what makes the most sense, considering all factors of the business and where we are today and where we want to go. And then we start to ideate, co-create, and prototype some solutions. And as mentioned at the beginning, we are end-to-end. So, for us, when we do these with clients and with different people, we like to go all the way from mapping and to thinking about everything, all the way to implementation and having a solution that can be ready to go and implemented within the business. And so, as somebody mentioned, how do we know that it's not just going to go business as usual? How do we know that it's not going to go back to that? And that's part of the thing. We don't know, right? So it may not. Either way, it wouldn't continuously flow as if nothing had happened. Something, we all need to take a moment and then move forward, right? And so the 4 different scenarios that we use as an exercise are continuation. So that one is going business as usual, more of the same. So after we have this moment, then we continue as always before. We have limits and discipline, where we start to adapt our behaviors. There are limits set in place. Then we have decline and collapse, where the system regresses or it becomes dysfunctional. And the fourth scenario is transformation, meaning new technologies, new businesses, social factors. The game really gets changed and kind of turned on its head. And so we'll go through 4 scenarios and again ask you to kind of think about them in your own context, in your own field, in your own industry. But scenario 1 is the continuation, and this after this moment where we take a much needed pause, we go back to the way everything was. So this means that cities that were touristed in Italy and things like that, they did receive a break. The environment received a break. But in that moment, once we're done focusing on ourselves and things start to open back up, we go back as usual. So second, we can all fly to Italy. We start booking our trips. Second, we get our jobs back. We start shopping. Second, we can leave our house. We start eating all the delicious junk food out in the world. And we kind of just return back. So we slow down, but the second that the gates open, we're off and running again. And that's scenario 1. So we'll go on to the next one, which is limits and discipline. And so this one, we're seeing more of a fenced backyard. So while those gates may open, there's a larger gate waiting outside of that. And so here it's not necessarily an apocalyptic state. It's not such a huge depression. Things slow, but you know, they slow down, but they still start to implement rules that even as it opens up, it doesn't allow us to kind of jump back and speed back into the way things were before. And so if we think about it, for example, in the terms of Corona, this could mean that there's, you know, a second wave. We start to see things differently. Maybe our restrictions go on much longer than we expected them to. We're distancing longer, travel bans remain. Maybe they stay like that indefinitely without really an end in sight. But it's not so tight where you can't do anything. It just means that everything is sort of walled and there are little boundaries before everything. For businesses, this means their supply chains are impacted. They have to rethink the way things are gonna go, especially in more of a long term. Cash flow is impacted. So it's not so bad, but we are seeing rules, regulations, limits, things like that. And then on the third scenario, this one is where we see collapse and we see more of a social apocalypse, right? So here it's not only do we have the virus and this, you know, mutation of it, new versions of it, but we're also seeing social issues being raised. We're seeing panic, and this uncertainty really leaves markets crashing, recessions, supply chain remains. Tourism, maybe even if there aren't any huge restrictions, people are not willing to or don't have the trust there. Things just kind of stay in this moment of upheaval and unrest. And for companies, this means that cash flow is impacted. It's really difficult to survive, not just on the side of cash, but also on the trust from the consumers. Taxes are impacted. We really see here things change. So governments may change, governments may shift. The role of government in itself may be thought of differently. And so here it's really fear, panic, rule. And for a lot of people today in this very moment, this is how the world feels. It feels like they're stuck in this apocalyptic scenario. So that's scenario 3. And then scenario 4 is transformation and the global awakening. And this is where we see AI companies, data companies, science, industry, startups really come to the rescue, really enter this fourth wave area and start to think of health and business and everything really holistically. Personalization becomes really normal. There's, you know, breakthroughs, massive breakthroughs across industries where we really allow technology to lead the way. For businesses, this could mean that working from home is really the new way to do business. You know, we have universal basic incomes. The society is really based on how you treat the weakest versus the survival of the fittest. There's internal innovation or inner innovation, social revolutions, and these are all ways to kind of disrupt the market. So with what happened, there's this huge disruption, and we don't just try to go back to normal, but we try to see how to leverage and how to move past and kind of accelerate. Here, the concern, though, becomes then privacy and what that means for all of us as individuals and what we're willing to give in order to get a little bit more. And so now that we've seen those scenarios, I really want to open it up again. We have here a couple more minutes, but it's to think about these scenarios, for example, for the travel industry, right? So if things were to go back to normal, right? So we take the much needed pause and then we continue just the way we were. What does that mean? What are some of those headlines that you see coming through about the travel industry? Then we have limits and discipline. So what does that look like if there are more boundaries and these rules stay for longer than we expected? And we have this fenced backyard. What does this mean for the travel industry as we know it? And that includes, you know, Airbnb, hotels, airlines, Ubers, all these different things that touch those industries. What would that look like? What does that mean for them? Then the same thing with collapse. So if we're in this state of dysfunction and upheaval and uncertainty, what do those industries do, and how do they come on top? How do they push through? And then transformation. If you were to think about, you know, this new era, everything is really this global awakening. What does that look like? What does that mean for all of these industries? And again, we can use the chat to drop some of those in. If you have any questions or you're considering something, definitely drop it into the Q&A. But this is what we have for these 4 scenarios and thinking about them within this industry. And I can give you guys a little bit of time and then hand it back over to Bibi to kind of explain some of the things that we've found in some of the other workshops that we've done.
So we have a comment from John here that I think it's a good comment for us to expand on the scenarios. So he says that on scenario 3, some would suggest that the US already has evidence of organized groups who desire collapse as a path to revolution. For example, communist progressists, liberals in the US want the capitalist system to fail. Never waste a crisis. And what I would like to focus on is that all scenarios, it's not one or the other. So the academic basis of where scenarios or these 4 scenarios comes from is from Jim Dater from University of Hawaii. He's kind of the founding father of strategic foresight. And what he did was a look through history to understand how history happened, basically. And then he mapped out these 4 narratives that time after time we could see. We either went through a growth path, or we had a transformation, or we had a crisis, or we had rules that changed the game a little bit. But the important thing is they are overlapping. So we see growth happening now, as well as we see limits and discipline. We are seeing that with travel bans everywhere. And at the same time, we do see collapse in some areas much more than others. And we do see transformation and people thinking about, someone made a comment about smart cities and green solutions and things like that. So all scenarios converge. We would love for you guys to send in the chat some of the examples that you can think of for each of the scenarios, just like John did here, for the travel industry more specifically. And while you do that, I'm just going to give some examples that can help. So we ran this workshop with a group of alumni from Harvard, and one of the guys were in the food and restaurant industry. When asked about continuation, he said, well, I would probably create the platform I'm already creating to do home delivery, right? But then when limits and discipline came in, he said, well, I would have to improve remote working and promote a healthier culture in my company through digital means. Then when he came to collapse, he said, I would provide food for a lower cost and source locally. So he shifted his business right there, and he became more social when he realized collapse was on the corner. And then when asked about transformation, he said he would go O2O and share knowledge and share learning activities. So he would become much more of a community guy, a community center through his business. And then on telecommunications, we have different examples. So in continuation, the guy said, well, I would just continue my focus on IoT, but I already have. But then on limits and discipline, he said, I would still invest in IoT. The guy really believes in IoT there. But then he came collapse. And when collapse came, he said, I would then invest in telemedicine and home learning activities as a way to pivot the business and survive. And then on transformation, he would become a unicorn, surprise the market with a new solution. This guy was also working on solutions for education, which many of you mentioned is your field. He was working on how to provide internet access for people with a lower income or less means, the Titanic syndrome that we spoke of. So teenagers could continue their education even if not going through school.
Yeah,
So we have a,
Viviana,
yes.
if I may, it's Mauricio. I think two great values of this type of work. Number one, companies, when they start preparing for the scenarios for possible futures, they are more prepared when some aspects of those futures happen. So we saw in the 70s, 80s, like Shell being prepared for the oil crisis. You know, they did a scenario of for that, and they were very well prepared to tackle the issues when they happened. And the second advantage of this, I actually would say three. Number one is what I just said. Number two is the possibility of having like a portfolio strategy to hedge, you know, the initiatives inside your company, your organization. So in this example that you've just shown, was interesting to see in the food restaurant, one of the participants, one of the CEOs of this food and restaurant business, he basically pivoted into becoming, you know, really almost like a broker for finding the cheapest food in the region. And so if you think about all these different scenarios and the possibilities that he designed, he could have a strategy of investing in some of these initiatives right now and not waiting for them to happen. So it's a hedging portfolio way of of working. And the third one has to do with a lot of what we do, which is anticipatory design, anticipatory innovation, where finding some of these weak signals, identifying them, we can start designing to, you know, some solutions to address these weak signals and be ahead of the competition. So those are the three main aspects that I think are worthwhile mentioning of a work like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mauricio, and building on that, Patricia just made a question, it's a very relevant one. How a research like this can help address the global impact of global white supremacy. This is an influence that will touch every driver of change. So yes, white supremacy, as well as any other social movements that we see rising to one side or the other, because we see, if we didn't go deep into the geopolitical and governmental aspects, but there are a lot of very delicate issues like that there that can go one way or the other. And as Mauricio was saying, the objective of a research like this is to help us design desirable futures. So if we can see a thing like this and we can see the impact of it, then maybe we can think about solutions and think about how to address that. So I think that is the real importance of us, to see the whole picture, is to be able to address and help design the futures instead of just being reactive to them, because that would be very prejudicial for all. And then we have John here. So we have 4 minutes left, right? So someone said, in continuation, Mary said, continuation regarding education, we would see a combination of face-to-face and online. Yes, definitely. And you all guys being mainly from education here, that's one of the fields that will have the bigger impact, because the traditional model was already being questioned in terms of like how pedagogically it worked, and now we went for like a simulacrum of that model that doesn't really work digitally. So the only way out here is really transformation or a new model. So education, it will have a great impact after this, or hopefully. And then John had one more comment. Let me read it.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, I think what he said is really saying, like, we're taking it, it's going to be a little bit bad for a while, but it really opens the door for this one to really go, for education to really go through a huge transformation, as Vivi was already kind of mentioning, holographic classrooms, making it available to everybody, whether you have the ability to get there or not. Really just huge area in this in education for transformation.
Yeah, completely agree, and love the expression, the real feel of intimacy is restored. Yes, the digital intimacy, and how we can create tools that make it feel less cold than this one. Yeah, let's hope, Mary. Let's hope and let's build. I think this is the purpose of this all. Let's build it together.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. On our end from MJV, we really want to say thank you. I don't know if Mauricio has any words, but if not, we can hand it back over. Go ahead, Mauricio.
Just that, well, first of all, the email there is cutting, at least in my screen. It's Mviana, but that's okay. Well, first I would like to thank you, Lucia, the Brazilian Chamber, and all the participants for engaging today. It was really fantastic. So Lucia, I think you're gonna say a few words for closing.
Yes, I'll take from here. Hello, everyone. Today's webinar raised some very provoking thoughts about the new norm after this pandemic. We certainly have not found all the answers after attending any of these webinars, but we find information that can help us navigate through these turbulent times and prepare ourselves for the time of rebound. MJV has made us aware of all the uncertainties, addressed the drivers of change, and gave us a sense that the new norm can be of our choices. So let's apply this research to find the answers and develop our solutions. One thing is for sure, we must be adaptable, flexible, and we need to be open for opportunities. So with that, I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. Thanks, Maria Luisa, Mauricio, Bibiani, and Jeanette for the great presentation. And our special thanks for Cyber and their partnership with us. We have some events coming up still in the month of June. Actually, they are sponsored by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce. Tomorrow, June the 17th at 10 a.m., the Georgia Department of Economic Development has a free webinar on exporting to Brazil opportunities in healthcare. On June the 18th at 9 a.m., the Mayor's Office of International Affairs is going to host Soccer in the Time of COVID-19. Cesar Vince will be the host of a conversation with representatives of the Atlanta Sports Council, Atlanta United, and Clube de Regatas Flamengo. On June the 26th is the World Trade Center Day, is a conference that is going to be an interactive and virtual experience. And this year's topic is cybersecurity and the global impact on trade and investment. Our dear Consul General of Brazil, Carlos Henrique de Abreu, will be a speaker during this event. The cost for this event is $175. However, if you attended this webinar today, you're going to get a discount and you can join the June 26th World Trade Day with a 25% discount. So I will post the discount code here on the chat, so everyone can go to the website and sign up for it. It's a great opportunity to participate in this event. It's a great event, got a lot of nice people, great speakers. So I guess I just did that. So the last thing I want to say is the evaluation. You're going to receive a survey at the end of this presentation. So I ask you to please give us feedback. It's very important to evaluate how we did so we can do it better next time. So thank you all again. And MJV, great presentation. We love to have you back, let's say in few months, because the world is exciting because it's a change. So we need to know all the other changes that are going to come after the pandemic. For that, please have a wonderful rest of the day and be safe.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye, guys.
Lucy, there was a very nice suggestion to have a Smarty Cities webinar. Let's organize that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, we should organize something on that because certainly something that will support but also change the way it was. So
I think that's why we get, ideas, no?
yeah. So I will end the webinar. Bye-bye, everyone. And thanks for joining us on this GSU BACC webinar.
Thank you.